Looking back on it, I didn't notice the first time that I watched it, but now that I've watched it 3 times, I noticed that Miguel was crying when Kayla and Aaron were going at each other, screaming. It makes sense that when he says, like, I tend to avoid things because of the environment that I grew in my house, that man was sitting on that couch, shaking, in tears. Nobody noticed because everyone's attention was on them. He was literally on the couch, shaking, crying. Like, that man is genuinely triggered when people are fighting. And nobody fucking noticed. And it genuinely breaks my heart because in that moment, nobody even noticed him to be like, okay, we need to calm down. Like, that man was just suffering in silence. That breaks my heart. That breaks my fucking heart.
The reason why all these ex-Islanders are crashing out and have been crashing out since the show was still on, Love Island USA, is because they didn't expect to not be chosen by the men who chose the women that they chose. Follow me. Welcome to my TED Talk. By now, if you haven't seen it yet, in summary, Kayla and Aaron were on a podcast. And in the podcast, Aaron started lying through his teeth, talking about, oh, Serena was screaming and yelling and throwing pots and being all extra when she was mad at Cordell after Casa. And he's just happy that Kayla didn't act that way, which, microaggression, borderline racism, but we'll leave that alone. And then after that podcast clip came out, Cordell came to his girl defense as he should and said, whoa there, buddy. She wasn't doing all that screaming, yelling, hollering. She was expressing her emotions. You my guy, but you're not going to talk about my girl like that. Then Leah hit him with a boop, white boy tears. And then Liv hit him with a boop, worry about your girl or your not girl or your man. Go follow Rob. Go watch Rob. Go make sure Rob is okay. I digress. So the reason why I came up with this hypothesis is because I'm looking at the way Aaron and Kayla have been talking crazy. I look at the way that Andrea been talking crazy. Daya been talking crazy. Sierra been talking crazy. Everybody been talking crazy since they left that house. And I think it's because they did not expect specifically Kenny, Cordell, and Miguel to pick who they wanted to pick. Let's call a spade a spade. Kenny, Cordell, and Miguel, fine as mud. I'm talking about the finest Islanders that walked in that house. You can argue with whoever you want to argue with, but you can't argue with me because they was the big three. Yeah. Now on the flip side, Leah, she is a pretty girl. She's a very pretty girl, and I haven't watched any podcasts really with her in them because I'm still trying to catch up. But I don't think she really would have had or really has had any issues in the past with dating. Because she is like the typical girl that a lot of dudes go after. She's a pretty girl. Now, Janae and Serena, two chocolate girls, beautiful girls, who have both gone on separate podcasts and have said things to the extent of the dudes coming in the house wasn't really checking for us. We didn't really feel like we were anybody's first choice. We saw what Janae went through in the house, right? Fast forward, Serena gets on a podcast recently and says her ex told her, you're a great girl. I love you. You're amazing. I just wish you was light-skinned. And I would also go out on a limb and say Janae has also faced colorism in dating, right? Now, when we put those two together, being the men, the dudes, the finest dudes from the island, picking 3 girls, 2 of which have felt like second choices, have experienced and lived in a world where they're told that their personality is great, they're warm, they're friendly, they're amazing, they're educated, they just need to be a little lighter. Think about that in the context of how these Islanders that have left have been crashing out, bruh. Crashing out. You got folks talking about, oh, if I was still in the house, Miguel would have picked me. Why? Why? Because you're exotic looking? Why? Why? Because you're more palatable? Then you think about Kenny, right? Kenny, this kind, sweet boy, very, very handsome, very gentle, being gentle with this black girl, this dark-skinned girl, right? You got Catherine coming out of the coming out of the house and basically insinuating that she had more of a relationship with Kenny than what was let on, and that could be true, but at the same time, Why do you think he should have picked you over Janae? Then we go to Cordell. Now, Daya and Serena are similar in skin tone, so I don't think that like skin tone really played as big of a factor with them, specifically those two, like Daya thinking that she deserves Cordell over Serena. But I will say that sensualness was an added component, because when you look at chocolate girls, who are usually the ones that are at the forefront of men's mind, it's because they're more sensual, they're more sexual, they're more out there with their bodies, right? Think about the women that people are usually calling the baddies, like bad bitches, the ones that are on the rapper's arms. If they're dark skinned, if they're chocolate, they also probably have a BBL, they titties done, teeth done, hair done. They're just very sexual. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not what Serena was, and that's what Daya was. So that's why she assumed and insinuated that Cordell would just pick her because, yeah, she's a pretty girl. Daya's pretty. We're not going to say and lie. But because she's also on the chocolater side, she got to add something in there. And the added factor is her sensualness that Serena wasn't really doing with Cordell. Pause. Get into my skin. In conclusion, these shorties are crashing out. And these dudes are crashing out too. Because when old boy was on live every single day, I was like, you can wait to get your phone back. I hope he's at the reunion. Anyway, I think that like the Islanders that are really crashing out didn't expect to not get selected, especially by the dudes that were the best ones on the island. Because we gonna call it spade a spade. They was the finest ones, and they were the best ones. They were the kindest. They were the smartest, right? Cordell said, I'm gonna take these 2 plates up to these 2 girls, and Miguel said, brother, don't do it. And he went against his better judgment. What happened? He was licking avocado toast off of his tongue, right? We watched, and they watched Serena get in Cordell's ass and hoped, prayed, and expected Cordell to drop her. And Cordell said, nah, bruh, I messed up. I'ma own that shit. I'ma take it. Whatever she gives to me, I'ma take it. Right? You saw Janae hug Kenny and be like, look, if you want her, you can have her, because I done took enough L's and I'm not doing this no more. This man was bawling tears, real tears. Not no Aaron fake tears, Rod fake tears. No, this was real tears. Real tears, right? You saw Miguel come back and be like, look, I told you this was going to happen, but I'm standing on business, and this, I want you. I want you. I explored with this other girl. I don't want her. I don't want her. Even though she expected to be the one picked. And on top of that, these folks are in the house making the 3 of those women feel like America hates them when they have always been beloved to us. They have always been beloved to us. So now they come out of the house and they're on press runs and press tours, and everybody's getting all this publicity and, like, you know, all these eyes on them. And the crash outs are confused as to why America is calling them crash outs and don't like them. And why America loves PPG and the men. And it's simple. It's because everybody loves a comeback story. Everybody does. No matter if you white, black, orange, purple, or green. Everybody loves a comeback story. Everybody loves to see the trials and tribulations of a story, see someone own up to it, and then see people move forward. And that's why Aaron and Kayla don't nobody like y'all. That's why. Because in the words of Leah, y'all are giving white women and white men tears. Jump scare. You feel me? Because every time Aaron cried, it was for someone that wasn't Kayla. And every time Kayla saw Aaron mess up and heard it, she ran back to him. So, baby girl, what are we supposed to do for you? I can't want for you what you don't want for yourself. Go take your bread. Go take your bread. Is he British? He from Britain, right? Australia. Go take your mandem. Go take your mandem. And watch out. Nobody feels bad for you. Nobody. I don't feel bad for you. I don't feel sorry for you. I don't. You made your bed. Now you got to sleep in it and lay in it. And PPG is on top. Period.
He mentioned that Native Americans were black-skinned people. A Voyager even said the Indians are very dark-complected, approaching black people. They have large lips.
If you want to watch her full video, I'm not sure if it's still up, but her @name is Real Kaya. I don't think listening to a literal colonizer's description of a person of color is the wisest decision. And also, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but claiming that Africans were never brought over from Africa would also suggest that the transatlantic slave trade never happened or the literal genocide of indigenous Americans. If invalidating Native Americans was a sport, then the internet has definitely won. These conspiracies that you see are usually untrue and oftentimes very harmful, so I suggest that you don't believe everything that you see on Twitter and TikTok. And if you're wondering, hey Jackie, if I can't use Twitter as a concrete resource for very valuable information that will help me navigate through the world of politics, society, and life in general, then what do I use? And to that I answer, crack open a book. Thank you. I think the most interesting part about watching the internet's reaction to the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial was when I had conversations with people. I would ask them to list their favorite actors or musicians or directors, and maybe 60% of the time, they would list a known abuser. This was very interesting to me and left me with a number of questions, one of them being, if you are so against domestic abuse and are trying to push the notion that abuse has no gender, then why are the only abusers that you can seem to forgive white, cis, and very powerful? And although I do agree with the saying, abuse has no gender, I also fully believe that accountability does have a gender. And I think that making a man who has a history of being violent with the people that he's around the face of the anti-domestic violence movement is very on par with the internet. And the hypocrisy was insane. I mean, watching people stand behind this mask of solitude and support when it was just there to hide their blatant misogyny and just nastiness. Because saying that you support victims and in the same breath going to use somebody recalling their essay story as a meme on the internet is insane. It's idiotic. And I'm not sorry to say this, but these misogynistic talking points and dog whistles don't make you the anti-abuse hero that you think it does. You're not a trailblazer. You're just a random person on the internet with no emotional intelligence who saw an opportunity to harass a woman. And when it comes down to it, I don't even think some of you even cared or thought that Amber Heard abused Johnny Depp. I think that you just saw a woman speaking up and using a platform and thought she was totally out of her place. And what puts the icing on top of this very toxic cake is the fact that a lot of these people hadn't shown any public support for any survivors prior to this trial, and probably will never again, unless another one of their favorite actors has a defamation case on their hands. I wasn't even going to talk about this trial publicly, but the way that people reacted was inappropriate and embarrassing and insensitive, and it almost felt necessary. This conversation deserves a lot of nuance, and it deserves to be had with people that have actually watched the trial, have actually, ingested the information and have come up with an organic opinion. But that's my 2 cents.
Only create and give misogynistic men more reason to continue.
Hey, before you watch the rest of this video, go watch that video first. This is such an interesting lens, and I guess I can both disagree and agree with the point that he was trying to make. But before I go on, let me start by saying you cannot really blame anybody other than misogynists for being misogynistic. And by saying that this wave of misandry is what's causing misogyny these days would be watering down the history of violence against women. And let me also say there has never, ever been a movement created by women for the protection of women that the masses of men have supported. We can go back into the 1800s and talk about when feminism was really introduced to Western culture. The first wave of feminism, the suffrage movement, and women's right to vote. The second wave of feminism and its fight for equality and reproductive rights. We can talk about the third wave of feminism and the fight for real representation. The fight against trafficking, the Me Too movement, the Find Our Stolen Sisters, all of these were either largely hated on or largely ignored. And I know this isn't necessarily what he's talking about, but this like background story is going to help the point that I'm trying to make. To me, the difference between misogyny and misandry is that misogyny is a socialization. It's a belief that women are lesser than, and misandry is the reaction to that belief. And you can give as many hypotheticals and theoreticals and fake scenarios as you want, but historically, there has never been a moment in time where women and men have the same amount of power. So misandry and misogyny cannot be held on the same standard. And I don't want you to get me wrong either. Is misandry hurting young boys in the media? Absolutely, I think so. And a lot of people in this conversation are chopping it up to two sides. It's either the people who fully agree with Drew Afalo or the people that fully agree with Andrew Tate. Which is interesting, but it's also such a funny observation because when the internet is split into two sides like this, it's always like a mean creator that fights fire with fire on the left, and on the right it's like this horrible, like dangerous, violent, ideology pushing person. I think for the first time ever there's this pushback against misogyny, and it's not rooted in morality. Women deciding to speak about their experiences with misogyny in whatever language they choose is not the reason that more men are openly misogynistic. I honestly think it's the other way around. Literally look at YouTube starting like 2012, going into Discord and then Instagram and then Reddit and then Facebook and then Twitter and now TikTok. And I don't know this creator, I've never seen their content, but I assume that they have a large male audience. But hatred against women and the radicalization of young men has been here long before you and I. And to ignore that is really dishonest, given the large platform that you have. I have so much to say and there's really not enough time, but just please tell the whole story. Hey everybody, here's a quick lesson on the history of minstrel shows. So by definition, a minstrel show was stage entertainment with songs and dances and comedic skits and routines based around stereotype depictions of Black people. And this form of so-called entertainment was really popular around 1830 to about 1890. And Thomas Rice, the father of blackface, founded this caricature called Jim Crow. And there are a bunch of other names that you might have heard about, like Zip Coon and Mammy. Here's a depiction of a Mammy that you could probably still find wherever you buy syrup. And like I said before, minstrel show entertainment includes imitating Black music and dances and speaking in plantation dialect. And for those of you who don't know, plantation dialect was the birth of what we now call AAVE. Surprise, it's not Twitter slang. But moving on, here's a poster of a minstrel show from the 1900s. And you're probably wondering, Jackie, why are you giving us this random lesson on minstrel shows? And it's because I wanted to offer some background history before I get into my next point. Modern day minstrel shows exist, and you all love them. This is a minstrel show. It is. This is everything I was just talking about except the blackface. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of comments saying, well, Black people are duetting it, they're laughing at it, they're saying the phrase, and eventually we'll all realize that that lady and so many other people that do this are not laughing with you, they're laughing at you. Please get a grip.
Really ensure that even the most powerful of women will lose that power in time.
In the history of mankind, there has never been and never will be a strong woman who has aged and lost her strength. However, there have been countless women, and will be countless more, who will think they are strong women and think they have strength, and then will age and realize they were just a pretty face.
I personally don't think that's entirely true. Let me tell you why, though. I think that me and this creator have very different ideas of what the word strength means. If I take into consideration my identity as a woman, and especially as a Black woman, and then consider womanhood placed into society at any age, in any time frame, 2016, 1970, or 1713, I think that there is resilience in existence. I think I could argue that to be a woman alive in society is to be strong, but that is not the point that I'm going to be arguing today. To say that a woman has never lost her strength due to aging, I think is just a blatant lie. You can name Susan Sarandon and Bette Midler and Betty White and all of the other women that you know that have thankfully persevered and are able to be respected within their careers despite their ages, but that doesn't really change anything. I have never met a girl that's just a pretty face. People are multifaceted, and it's very naive of you to think that. Most women are scared to look 50 years old when they're 50 years old, and that's not just something random that popped into their head. Insecurities are not organic thoughts. Aging for women is demonized, and they've been putting it into books, ads, commercials, TV shows. It is in everything and anything that you can consume. And most women, if not all, despite where you are in your career, are at a constant state of reinvention. And I think that we're finally learning, especially through main media, that women are not things that have to become new, that have to become shiny. We're not objects, and we're not gifts, and we're not something to gawk at. We're people that live human lives. This creator is saying that the problem is women that place too much value in the beauty of their youth. I say that's condescending, naive, and you're undermining the intelligence of women everywhere. Through the ages, women realize that society is kinder to those they deem as beautiful. And so they decided to use that to their advantage. And I agree, beauty and strength are both internal things. But please don't sit here on a high horse and pretend that respect and opportunity for women doesn't come at a price.
A proudly banging Kanye West, a once very vocal Donald Trump supporter, while he was simultaneously running an extremely aggressive harassment campaign against his ex-wife. He was likely hate tweeting her while in bed with you.
I love this video so much, and I love it because for the longest time I've been looking for examples on how men who consider themselves to be feminists and then spew very violent rhetoric are a lot more dangerous than men who just openly hate women, specifically in online discourse spaces. And on the internet there are these things called echo chambers. And so you're going to see a lot of videos that you align yourself with politically or socially or whatever the case may be. And the reason that I think this is dangerous is because there are very dark corners of the internet where people openly hate on groups. But something that is especially heinous is to leave those dark corners and to come into these safe places and disguise yourself as an ally. And I'm not saying that that is this person's intention, but just seeing how often they end up in situations like these for things that come out of their mouth, it's kind of telling. And whenever I see this person, I can only think of one thing, and it's a pretty popular quote, but it is, hypocrisy is a compliment that vice pays to virtue. And I'm not going to get into this person's character, as I've never had a conversation with you, but I don't think I'd enjoy one. There are a few harmful things that they said in that video that I want to address.
You mean to tell me you were willing to lay down and get your pork chop penetrated by a 45?
I know a lot of people thought that that was really funny, but that was extremely disgusting. I think that once you start using crude language like this to discuss somebody's intimate history as a gotcha moment, everything that comes out of your mouth will be of zero importance to me.
With you. You sold out every single last one of your feminist morals when you decided to play dress up with Kim Kardashian's sloppy second.
You, looking the way you do and having the history that you do, don't really have the reins to call anybody a feminist or anybody the opposite of one. I know the internet has led you to believe that you are the messiah of feminism or the honcho of women's rights, but under all of your pitchy yelling and low blows, the fact of the matter is you were called a misogynist and you reacted to and denied it by being misogynistic. And so I can't say that I know everything, but if something quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, then I bet it's a duck. Hey guys, so earlier this morning, Amber Heard posted a note in regards to the defamation trial that happened earlier this year with Johnny Depp. And in her note, she basically said that she's settling the defamation case because she's not going to go through the tribulations of a third trial. And I put the note up on my story with a Stand With Amber Heard hashtag, and I started getting a lot of questions. And most of the negative messages were saying that Amber Heard is a liar, that it was mutual abuse, or how I could believe somebody whose only supporter in the courtroom was their sister. And I think that this is a perfect time to talk about the perfect victim complex or the ideal victim hierarchy. And this complex can be used in any case where there's a victim, but most times it's used in SA cases. So when you hear people asking survivors what they were wearing during their assault, or if they are party girls or any other invasive questions that don't really have anything to do with the case, this is that complex being used. The perfect victim is basically the person who deserved it the least, the one who didn't fight back, the one that didn't ask for it. And this idea was made to discredit victims, and more times than not, it works. And despite Depp's extensive history of violence and just hate for multiple groups of people, the smear campaign against Amber Heard worked because she was painted as a bad victim. And to me, all of this just begs the question of if we are as progressive as we think that we are when it comes to violence against women. And personally, I just think that people are in support of Depp because they only see the iconic roles that he's played and not the fact that he's been extremely violent over the years and has also been ruled a wife beater by a high court justice. And I bring this up not only because of the campaign against Amber Heard, but the fact that half of the internet was babying a violent, bigoted man, as it often does. There were edits and audios and memes of the case, which is extremely inappropriate regardless of who you're in support of. And frankly, the entire thing was treated like a soap opera and not a trial of defamation and a case of abuse. With all of that being said, the most prevalent question that I get asked is, how can I support Amber Heard if I'm always preaching about supporting victims? And to that, I say, I support Amber Heard because I always preach about supporting victims. This male gaze versus female gaze trend has been really popular for a long time on this app, and I wanted to read a quote by Margaret Atwood. Even pretending that you aren't catering to male fantasies is a male fantasy. Pretending you're unseen. Pretending you have a life of your own. That you can wash your feet and comb your hair, unconscious to the ever-present watcher peering through the keyhole in your own head. If nowhere else, you are a woman with a man inside watching a woman. You are your own voyeur. That quote was from The Robber Bride, which I hear is a really great book. And what I really want to talk about is the last part where she says that you are a woman with a man inside watching a woman. And I think it does a really good job at summarizing a pretty unexplainable experience. I feel like a lot of people, and especially women, can recall a time in their lives where they were performing a mundane task or doing something unimportant, and they felt as though they still had to look beautiful or presentable. It's as if the curtains never go down and the show never stops, even when you're alone. And that brings me to the idea of a female gaze and a male gaze. And it made me question a lot, because what is a female gaze if not a rebellion against the male gaze, which in turn makes it the male gaze? And what I mean by this is, although traditional ideas of femininity and submissiveness are objectified, the thought of denying and defying what a woman should be has been eroticized. It's almost a challenge for a lot of men to fix what they think is a pretty wounded bird. And all of this leads me to believe that regardless of how you decide to act and what you decide to wear and what career path you choose, the male gaze isn't something that you can escape. And although the principle of the trend is actually pretty heartwarming, it's always nice to see people grow into themselves and become comfortable, but I don't think that the subversion of the male gaze is as easy as changing your wardrobe. So I came across this video on Twitter today, and it was basically a black man chasing this Asian lady, and he was making animal noises and grunting at her and just chasing her down the street, and it was night. And the caption, it was a Snapchat video, the caption was she busted a U-turn as soon as she saw him walking. And most of the comments on the original post were making jokes about the situation and calling that lady out for racial discrimination and judging him and whatnot. And there was a range of comments, but I think the thing that you notice most is that most of the guys in the comment section were kind of applauding the guy and being well, why would you judge him? And then the girls in the comment section are why are you chasing this random lady in the dead of night? And I think it's situations like these that kind of highlight the space between different minority groups and communities. And this lady very well could have been judging this guy because he's black, especially considering, the conflict and prejudice between black and Asian communities that exists for a multitude of reasons, one of them being the model minority myth. And I think the lack of understanding of intersectionality kind of puts us in these situations. Like, I feel like a lot of people that are in minority groups often forget about their privilege because of the minority they're in, and ignore the other factors about themselves. For example, there's a disconnect between women of color and white women in spaces where feminism or, misogyny or the patriarchy is being discussed. And this is because many white women fail to realize the intersection that women of color, being a woman and also being a person of color, I think they see it as just one big community when it's really not that. And I guess this all just goes to say that this guy, who very well could have been judged because of the color of his skin, but we don't really know that, even though it very well could have been possible. What we do know is that he is a man chasing this lady down a dark alleyway at night. And another fact is that many, many, many women will cross the street if they see a man walking towards them, regardless of race. Your oppression doesn't erase your privilege, and it's really important to recognize that. Most of you are probably well aware of the mass internet harassment that's been directed towards Margot Robbie the past few weeks. It's become a trend to call her mid or mediocre. And she's not the only woman that's been targeted by these people. Zendaya is another example. And this is all very interesting to me because Zendaya and Margot Robbie in particular used to be very well liked by men generally. It's almost as if overnight they've decided that these women are mediocre or overhyped and undeserving of the recognition they receive. And honestly, all this isn't random at all, and by now should probably be expected. And this really has nothing to do with the looks of women that look like Zendaya or Margot Robbie. It has more to do with their success, their accumulation of popularity, and their works recognition by prestigious academies. What this comparison shows here, blatantly, is that it has nothing to do with what they look like. It's their success levels. Because in the brains of these individuals, you can't have two specific things when you're a woman. You don't get to be successful within your career when the occupation has nothing to do with your level of beauty, and then be beautiful at the exact same time. She's gotten to play both ugly and beautiful characters while still being beautiful outside of those characters. Another example would be Margot Robbie's breakout performance as Naomi on Wolf of Wall Street. At this time, Margot Robbie was only seen as a blonde bombshell who could only play such roles. Her role as Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad was also well acclaimed, but honestly, she was still just a sidekick and love interest who was always trotting after the actual main character. So basically, what I'm saying is that if you pay close enough attention, you'll see that the more popularity and consistent success that you see within these women's careers is when these misogynists finally realize that these characters that they love so much are really people. They're women, credited women with dreams and goals, fulfilled dreams and goals at that. They are uncomfortable with the amount of power that these women have, and the only way to diminish power is by taking away the source, and they think that the source is youth and beauty and not talent and motivation, which is why it's become so popular to call them ugly on the internet. Insulting and humiliating these women is their attempt to make them small enough to hold again. So, if you're ever at a point within your career when you're being harassed by unemployed men on the internet, just know that you made it. Hey guys, I know most of you have already seen what's been going on with the Israel and Palestine conflict, and I just wanted to say a few things. First and foremost, and most importantly, please be aware of the type of news that you're consuming and who you're consuming it from and their credibility, because there's a lot of propaganda being spread right now. With that being said, this situation is not complex. This is not a complex situation at all. It's extremely nuanced, and there's a lot of history behind it, but it is not something that's hard to wrap your brain around. On October 7th, Hamas militants sent missiles to different parts of Israel, subsequently killing innocent people. This is an undeniable fact. We saw this happen. But the truth of the matter is, the organization and its violence would not exist without Israel's occupation that's been going on for the last several decades. Palestinians have been displaced from their homes. They're victims of ethnic cleansing. We are watching an attempt at genocide. The water and electricity usage of the people of Gaza is being dictated by Israel. There are borders and fences surrounding Gaza. You cannot leave without special permission. They even took away their airport. This is an open-air jail. And above this very blatant human rights crisis, there is the media trying to portray Palestinians as brown, violent terrorists, all of them. There's a very specific type of disappointment that comes with seeing that the world is, in fact, capable of sticking up for innocent people, just not for yours. Do not accept celebrities who post infographics they know nothing about. Do not accept celebrities who will post Jewish children, then delete the post when they realize that they're not Jewish children. They're Palestinian children literally looking up at the missiles falling down on them. Do not accept celebrities that tell you that not standing with Israel's occupation is standing for terrorism. Do not do that. And before you go and tell anybody how they should react to the ignored mistreatment of their people, please understand this. All conflict starts somewhere, and this didn't start last week. And the death of innocent people is an outcome of Israel and how it's treated Palestinians. For everybody saying that they don't support Palestine because Palestine doesn't support queer people, I want you to ask yourself how many anti-queer legislative bills, acts, and laws have been passed in America in the last 5 years. I want you to ask yourself where queer people in the United States of America fall under statistics of poverty, homelessness, and suicide. And now that you have the understanding of where America stands when it comes to queer rights, I want you to put yourself in this specific scenario. Imagine your family being displaced from the home that they've owned for 6, 7, 8 generations. Now imagine in present day, your people being massacred by one of the most powerful militias in the entire world. Now imagine that same militia being backed, supported, and funded by the 2 most powerful nations in the world, one of those nations being the exact one that gave away your rights to your soil in the first place. And finally, I want you to imagine, after experiencing all of this inhumanity, there is somebody across the world saying that they do not support you because you don't support queer people. Guys, what is respectability politics in the middle of a genocide? That child that was going to grow up and challenge anti-queer ideals, how do you know that they're not dead in rubble right now? How are they supposed to organize and lead protests with missiles flying above their heads? Where are they supposed to have conversations about social change while their schools, their churches, their hospitals, their homes are split in 2? What is going through your head while your sister or your brother or your cousin or your best friend or your mom or your dad or your child is missing somewhere and you don't know whether or not they're dead? Do Palestinians need to stop fearing for their lives, put everything on hold to denounce homophobia so that you, sitting here in America on your phone, just feels a little bit more comfortable and more willing to say, free Palestine, stop genocide? Are you serious?
Woo! Wow, you hear that? I do want to give you one piece of good news, that day and night, every few minutes, sometimes seconds, I can hear our IDF, our incredible army, bombing the living daylights out of Hamas. And it is giving me so much strength. You can hear, I don't know if you guys can hear, we will come.
I just watched a video of a medic and his assistant in great distress after a bombing. And after maybe 30 seconds into the video, another missile strikes and kills both of them. And when he falls, the camera is still recording. And all that's in frame is his hand and a pool of blood seeping into the cement and the grass. And earlier this morning, I watched a video of a Palestinian boy's legs dangling from the ceiling. His skin is gray and bruised, and he'd been left there for days. And I also watched a video of a woman glancing at a body being pushed in a stretcher in the hallway of a hospital. And when she takes another glance, she realizes it's her daughter. And her screams of grief are a type of grief that I can't even conceptualize. I can't even make sense of it. I've worked in the political sphere for some time now, and most people that follow me for my social and political commentary, and I'm never usually rendered speechless, but I'm absolutely speechless. Just absolutely speechless. If I could have made a profound video that would have changed the world, I would have done it by now. And although I like to keep my videos professional when I'm dealing with such topics, I originally came on here specifically to call this young woman a selfish, lying propagandist ghoul. And I still believe that wholeheartedly. But I do want to address some other people today. To my Palestinian followers and any Palestinian that this video reaches, the President of the United States does not speak for me. I don't stand with Israel. I don't stand with colonial terror. I don't stand with occupation. I don't believe in ethno-states, and I don't stand with genocide. And I think that any politician and any celebrity and any brand that is holding up that idea is a warmongering, Zionist, bloodthirsty pig. I see the propaganda. I see the dehumanization. I see the way the media portrays the Middle East as a whole, and the entire world owes you a million apologies. And for the rest of my followers, if you're going to take any of the information I give you, let it be this. They don't get to turn it off. They don't get to get off Twitter or get off Instagram or get off TikTok. They don't get to turn the TV off when it gets a little bit too uncomfortable. They don't have the luxury of looking away. So please, do the organizing. Go to the marches. Donate. Press people in political power. And if all that you can do in this time is talk about it, then I am begging you. I'm begging you from the bottom of my heart, never shut up.
Talking about don't complain when Israel and Palestine gets worse because Donald Trump does.
Instead of pressuring President Biden to call for an immediate ceasefire, instead of pressuring President Biden to stop aiding and abetting a literal genocide, you're on TikTok calling a bunch of voters selfish because they aren't comfortable with the fact that their tax dollars are killing a bunch of children. The presidential elections are a year out, and you're giving your full support to Biden without any kind of compromise from their administration. I don't know if you remember this or not, but the people of the United States don't work for President Biden. It's kind of the other way around. Harry goes on to say that if Trump is elected for president, then there's not going to be anybody left in the White House to care about climate change. But if I do remember correctly, it was Biden that approved the Willow Project in August of 2022. The oil extraction project that threatens to release 260 million metric tons of CO2. Who needs climate change deniers when you have a president like Joe Biden? You can use the war against women's reproductive rights or the discrimination of immigrants or even the genocide of Palestinians as a tool to fearmonger, but you will not successfully get people to vote for Biden this way. And you don't need to tell me about Project 2025. I know what Project 2025 is. I'm not in support of Donald Trump, but if you want people to vote for Joe Biden, then you tell Joe Biden to go do his job.
Let's talk about Blink Twice. The movie, Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut. Overall thoughts on the movie, fine. Acting, great. I think everyone did a phenomenal job acting. Script, directing, fine. I wasn't like blown away by anything. But I want to talk about something very specific. This movie, the reason why I was interested in watching this movie was because there was a lot of controversy, or not even controversy, conversation surrounding the trigger warning that plays before the film and that the film released before the release. So the trigger warning comes out and everyone's like, woohoo, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. But really, like, they only like put out a trigger warning because It Ends With Us didn't, and they got flamed for that. So they were like, we gotta cover our asses. Whatever, you do what you gotta do. I was like, okay, what's the problem? There was conversation surrounding that the trigger warning did not accurately warn people of the scenes that were in the movie. And I was like, okay, let me see this movie and let me see what I think about it. Oh my God, were they right? Oh my God, the noise is right. How do I say this? When I say that, like, if sexual violence is triggering for you, do not see this movie. I mean that from the bottom of my, like, from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I mean that please don't watch this movie. I have seen a lot of movies, and I have seen a lot of horror movies, and I'm mostly a girl that's scared of jump scares. I'm not one that's like, you know, super sensitive about gore and stuff. Like I have my gags and my moments, but I'm not super viscerally like shaken up about like gore or a lot of stuff like violence shown. I have a Mother poster right there. That's a pretty violent and heavy topic movie, you know? I get it. It's part of cinema. This fucking scene, nothing will prepare you for it. I literally was sitting next to the person I saw the movie with, and I couldn't even look at them. I couldn't look at them. I couldn't touch them. I was like, my stomach was turned. I couldn't relax. Like, I was in this recliner seat. I can't relax anymore. I'm stiff. I'm like I can't stop my hands from moving. Like, and I was so upset. And by the end of the movie, that scene had no purpose. I kept coming back to this idea of, okay, maybe there's going to be a purpose for that. No. It revealed something that I already knew what was happening. It revealed something that I pretty much already gathered. I already kind of gathered it from the beginning of the press for the movie, because if you watch the trailer, it's a pretty much one-to-one comparison to the real events of the Jeffrey Epstein Island. And if you don't know what happened in the Jeffrey Epstein Island, it's an island where Jeffrey Epstein and a bunch of other billionaires sex trafficked young girls. And that is a direct correlation. It's called Blink Twice. It's about a billionaire and all his friends going to an island. And I already kind of figured it out. But the scene they choose to show violence against women was so brutal and upsetting, in my opinion. And this is just my opinion, so I think it will affect individuals differently. But if I could do one thing from watching that movie, is to warn people that if it is something that does upset you, please do not take my word lightly. Do not take my warnings lightly. Please, if you are even considering going to watch it, please look up the details of that scene, because it is not something that is light. It is not something that is up for interpretation. It is not something that is alluded to. It is in your face, graphic, and brutal. And it viscerally upset. It made me so upset. I cannot put that into words enough. And I've grown a lot over the years. I remember I made a video on Promising Young Women, and I honestly liked Promising Young Women. And then I can grow up and realize that like there are some parts of this where it does seem very insensitive, or even like not very like, I don't know. I don't like it as much as I did when I was younger, because I grew up and matured and like actually saw some of the issues with it. But Blink Twice is a good concept. I like the concept. It has a similar concept to Get Out or even Ready or Not. You know, obviously Ready or Not is more of a comedy, but it's a similar concept. And I think that there's ways that you could have accomplished that. And I think most of the movie does accomplish that. Do I think there's a weird tone shift in the middle of the movie where it seems like two different directors made the movie? Yes. But that's just my opinion. That's not something that's fatally, morally wrong with the movie, right? But I really wanted to make this video because I think that there's a lot of conversation surrounding this scene. And as a woman who has her own history and her own history with sexual violence, like, I cannot let this movie continue on without properly warning my like majority female audience that it is not this just classic violent scene. It is awful. It is awful to watch. I was so shocked by it. It seemed like so much for shock value, and I left the film wondering who the fuck was that scene for, because it wasn't for women who endured it. It's not for victims of sexual violence. And I don't think, on the other hand, it's for people who perpetuate that violence either. I really don't think it's for either, and I don't think this movie is this like grand message tell-all that it like almost tries to be, but I don't need it to be. I don't need movies to be a grand revelation to me. I don't need it to teach me something that I didn't know before. Like, Get Out is a really great movie, but like, it's not revealing to the world that racism exists, right? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that movie that teaches us something. I don't believe that Blink Twice has to be this ceremony to teach you that sexual violence against women exists. But I find myself going back to that scene constantly being like, who the fuck was that for? Like, genuinely, who was it for? Because as someone that like has endured sexual violence, it was so batshit crazy to include that, in my opinion. And when I hear stuff around the movie, and when I hear that Zoe Kravitz originally wanted to name the movie Pussy Island, something about my brain gets, like, I flare up, because for some reason that fucking bothers me so much. And I get it, it's supposed to be a commentary, I get it, like, I get it, that's the point. That's your point yourself into the grave. I still, something about that just seems like a complete misunderstanding of it, and it almost like doesn't seem like you're making it for the right reasons, in my opinion, if that's what you originally wanted to name the movie. But that's just my opinion. I don't think that like Zoe Kravitz is this like inherently bad person for this movie. I think that there's a lot of people like involved in the movie, and I don't want this to seem like, you know, a bashing of her. It's more of that scene specifically. I don't know if she had like a direct, like she needed this scene, and I don't know. I don't know any of the behind the scenes, but I'm telling you how I felt from that scene, and why I feel so passionately about this is because I felt so upset while watching it, and I want to, if I can prevent one person from feeling that didn't want to feel that, I will do that, because it was, you know, upsetting. And everyone's triggers are their own, like, you know, responsibility, yada, yada, yada. But like, if you're gonna put a trigger warning, you're basically telling me that you got my back. Like, if you putting a trigger warning, you're in turn being like, I got you, sis. Like, I'm warning you, don't worry. You're not gonna like see anything that you're like not prepared for, and that's gonna like fucking trigger you. And then the one scene that is so triggering is like, I couldn't have even imagined that in like a million years would my mind think that was what I was being warned of, right? If that makes sense, let me know. I know this is probably a controversial video. I don't want to make anyone upset. If you liked the movie, I'm so glad you liked it. I thought the movie was fine overall. It's just that one scene that really does put a question mark in my head of like, who are we doing this for? And if you have an answer for that, I would love to hear it. But I was upset by that scene. And if you're affected by those things, please take caution before you go see that movie. Okay, so Blink Twice, everybody's talking about it. I made videos about it, but I'm gonna actually come here and tell you exactly what I'm talking about and exactly what people are talking about when they're talking about the scene that's triggering, because everyone's just kind of saying there's a scene that's disturbing, there's something disturbing, and no one's really saying what it is. People who are victims of sexual violence, I think you should know this going through, men and women, because it is very triggering and traumatizing. So the scene that everyone's talking about, spoiler alert, the movie is a direct commentary on Jeffrey Epstein's island and sex trafficking rings and operations within Hollywood and the one percenters and rich billionaires. It's a direct commentary on it. The girls are invited to the island and they are sex trafficked, but the plot twist about this is that they are being sprayed with a perfume that makes them forget all the traumatizing, violent things that have happened to them. So they continuously stay there. They don't know how long they've been there, and they continuously are trafficked every single night without their knowing. They insinuate this in many ways, but they do one more thing, which is show and depict the sexual assault scenes. And it's a short scene. There's probably, I think it's 2 short scenes, but they're very graphic. There is a short scene depicting multiple women being violently assaulted on screen, and it is filled with visual and audible sounds of agony. It is girls screaming and running away. There's a boy screaming, run away. It is blunt. It is cruel. It is no other way to be interpreted. It's not an interpretation. It's not alluding. It's not insinuating. It is rape scenes shown. And if this gets taken down, I'm sorry, but I don't want to censor the words, because the words and the language that you use is, I want to hammer in that it is not censored. It is not alluded to. It is direct. And that's the scene that everyone's talking about. It's a pan shot of multiple women being assaulted, tied up, and running away from rapist. That's what's happening. And it is very, very difficult to watch. And I think that I'm glad I'm seeing a lot of people talk about that, the scene, and like, you know, it's a conversation starter, and it talks about a lot. You end up talking a lot more about trafficking in general and sexual violence against women. And I do think that's important, but everyone just keeps referring to it as the scene. And if you haven't seen the movie, you're gonna be like, what's the scene? What's the scene? That's the scene. And I want you to take it as literal as possible, because I did not realize the severity of it, and I was really affected by it. And honestly, if I wasn't so invested in movies in general, if I was just like a casual moviegoer, if I didn't like analyzing movies and, you know, commenting on them or reviewing them, I would have walked out. It was that bad. Okay, I'm just using this comment because it's like not specifically about what I'm talking about. So sorry to this commenter. Like I just picked it because I wanted to talk about more about this video. The comment section, not this one, is a lot of people talking, and a lot of people almost getting defensive on behalf of the movie of if you have PTSD or past trauma and are going to see a movie, it's your responsibility to look up the triggers before you see it. And for the most part, I do agree with that, but I think that's like kind of a backward statement to make. If the movie itself like provides a trigger warning, like that should be descriptive enough for you to make the decision. And the problem is that it's not. That's why I made the video, because I do believe your triggers are your own responsibility. That's why I make the video, because I think if I knew the extent of the scene, I probably wouldn't have gone to see the movie. So I made the video so people could be responsible for their own triggers. So people could make that choice, because I think the choice is what matters. And I think that if you're going to make this big thing of like, we're putting a trigger warning before the movie and we're releasing it on our social medias, you better do a damn good job describing the full extent of the scenes. And one thing that I think is really important is their language that they use. I think they use a lot of vague language to kind of cover their ass on all angles, you know, abuse of power, sexual violence, you know, mature scenes. They leave out one word, which I think is important when talking about sexual violence and sexual assault within movies, is the word graphic. Because I can handle a lot of like topics within movies. I can handle people talking about sexual assault. I can handle scenes that allude to sexual assault. The word graphic is very important, because that tells you that it is going to be something visually, audibly, it's going to be graphic. That's the part that I think is missing. But I think to have this whole big high horse mentality of like, you guys are responsible for your own, like, you know, sensitivities on a video where it is solely made for people who are more sensitive or who do have past trauma is kind of ridiculous, because that's what I'm doing. I'm making the video for people with sensitivity or with, you know, past experience that could, this movie could be harmful for them, because I don't think that I have a past experience. And I looked at the trigger warning and I was like, okay, let's go. Not in a million years would I have expected that to be the scene. Maybe I'm stupid, but I think most people wouldn't have expected that scene. But before I saw the movie, I was honestly right with you guys. I watched a bunch of videos of people being like, it's the trigger warning isn't properly worn, and the scenes are so much worse. And I was honestly kind of like, I was like you guys. I was literally like, I'm tough. Like, I can handle it. Like, It's your own responsibility to find out what's triggering to you if you watch a movie. And then I watched the movie and I had a complete 180 change of mind. I was like, absolutely not. No, they were right. They were actually so right. I'm the one that should have taken that seriously, and I didn't. So if I could do one thing, it was to make a video properly describing what happened so people could make that choice. And if you still want to go through and watch the movie, that's your choice too. I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't watch the movie. Well, I did say that. I said you shouldn't watch the movie if you struggle with sexual violence because it was triggering. But if you want to go see the movie, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to take the ticket out of your hand and like tell you, I'm not like boycotting the movie. I'm just saying like, yeah, people should be responsible for their own triggers. I'm going to help them be responsible and tell them what I was so triggered by.
I personally hate it when people are like, oh, men's mental health. Oh, men are afraid of being emotional. Because it's not that men are afraid of being emotional. They are afraid of being a woman. In high school, I had this like substitute teacher who started talking about gender studies and said that men are afraid of showing their emotions because they're socialized not to show emotions in public, which is true. But I don't think they're afraid of showing emotion because men show emotions all the time. They're more likely to express their anger and lash out. Like those are extreme emotions. So it's not that they're afraid of expressing emotions. It's that as a society, we have labeled certain emotions as feminine. So emotions such as sadness, like tears, or love, like caring for others, those are considered to be feminine traits. And those are the emotions that men reject because they don't want to be feminine, because the worst thing they can be is a woman. So when people are like, we should teach men to be more vulnerable, we should let them be more emotional. No, we should teach them to stop hating women. It's all about that.
What I don't get, and something that I really want to rant about, is how society treats people who are quiet, reserved, shy, or introverted. I would consider myself the type of person who genuinely likes to socialize because I like listening, observing, and getting to know people. But sometimes I'll be having conversations with people and we'll be talking about first impressions and they'll tell me like, oh my gosh, like when I first met you, you were so reserved and you're so quiet, this is that. And I'm like, I get confused. I get very confused. And I'm like, no, like I just like listening and I like observing. Like that's something I genuinely like to do. I feel like there's two sides of socializing. There's the talking part and there's the listening and observing. Like socializing is not just like speaking. And I feel like the world can't just be full of extroverts. I feel like people just expect everyone to be just this extroverted, talkative person. Not everyone can be like that, and that's fine. I think the world needs balance, and with every extroverted person, you need an introvert. With every talkative, loud person, you need that quiet, reserved, shy person. You can't have a conversation if everyone's just talking at each other. Not only do you need the talker, you need the listener, and I don't understand why that's such a bad thing. Because whenever someone is shy, quiet, especially in school, especially at work, people either treat you weirdly or people think you have something to hide. And that's when I also find it weird when people are like, I'm gonna break you out of your shell. What? And sometimes I'm like, what shell? Like, that's such a weird thing to say. Because not everyone, you're not obligated to someone's life. Some people are just those type of talkative people where they will tell you their entire lore and like family lineage the first 5 seconds they meet you. But me, I'm not like that, and people think I'm closed off and reserved. It's like, no, like I'm an open book. You just have to ask me. Like, it's so funny when I drop a random piece of information and my friends will be like, oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me that? I never knew that. And I'm like, you never asked.
Can I be messy for a second? Something that I always constantly think about like every 2 or 3 months is Zendaya and Tom Holland's lip sync battle. Because I just cannot believe that he did her like that. All Zendaya had was a goddamn button up, a fitted hat, and a dream. She brought a knife to a gunfight. Bro, I could tell that, like, I don't know if his agent whispered in his ear or said, hey, like, you're about to get dropped or something. But he performed, like, it literally, like, he didn't even get that type of performance in Spider-Man. And speaking of Spider-Man, you literally Spider-Man. Like, you can't let your girlfriend win a lip sync battle? Like, how greedy and wicked are you? And you did all of this in front of LL Cool J. Like, I can't believe this. Tom Holland, I know the week before this lip sync battle, he was in there fucking prepping. He didn't miss a fucking rehearsal. He was performing like it was a Juilliard audition. Everything was on the line. Like his life, his career, it gave very much Say the Last Dance. Like I was believing like there's a story here. Like Tom has been going through some shit. His mama rent had to be due. His grandma rent was due. They was gonna take the car. It was him or Zendaya, and he chose himself. I need Zendaya and Tom Holland to do a rematch. Like, I literally will not be able to sleep at night because Zendaya has to get her lick back. Like, she has to. Like, she cannot go out like this. And then, I don't even know if they were dating at the time that they filmed this, but even if they weren't, it's like, damn, you fixed her whole door, you know what I'm saying, as a friend, but you won't let her win a lip sync battle? Tom Holland is too competitive for me. He's too competitive.